Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We are happy to have with us Father Ed Steiner. He is the senior priest and rector at the Cathedral of the Incarnation there on West End. We're talking about a topic I've never talked about on OpenLine. Fascinating discussion, and thank you again for coming on and talking about this. Talking about exorcisms. You believe they're real. You've talked to people who have actually seen this, been involved in it. So, is there a caution here? Again, you believe this is real, but is there a caution about focusing on these things maybe too much?
Oh, yes, because it's, the saying is, especially for a Christian, the good always outweighs the bad. Jesus said, the poor you always have with you. But even though he defeated death, even though he won the battles, all of his battles with demons and the devil, they're still there. But the war's been won. That's the way I like to put it. The war has been won, but there's still a lot of skirmishes. So the good outweighs the bad. And a lot of people talk about, there's a balance between good and evil, kind of that Star Wars thing, there's got to be like a Darth Vader to a Jedi Knight. Well, not that way in faith and in Christianity. The good far outweighs the bad. I mean, there's not an equal evil to God. Our Christian faith will not allow there to be an equal evil to God. But when you start kind of moving down the ranks, because the scriptures talk about, especially the book of Daniel, book of Revelation, they talk about fallen angels. So, ultimately, in the book of Genesis tells us, well, where does evil come from? God didn't create evil, so where does it come from? Evil comes from a choice that people make, that I choose what I want over what God wants. And ultimately that was the sin of Adam and Eve. They chose what they wanted to do over what God wanted them to do. And it's interesting that as the serpent is presented, which was the image of the god Baal, of the Canaanites really, and in Canaanite culture, that serpent Baal was actually a good, loving God. It was a god of fertility. But that God was able to trick, that God was able to tempt people to come his way rather than staying with the God of Israel. And so whenever people, begin to choose what I want over what God wants, evil starts coming out of that. There are consequences to that. And the biggest consequence of all becomes manifestation of evil in the lives of people.
I've heard the Bible can be boiled down to two words: God wins. And,
yes, you can say that.
And that's comforting.
Yeah, or even just change it a little bit, God has won.
He has won. And so that's comforting.
Yes.
And so in the case of these exorcisms, where you've talked to the person who's seen the three, is that the case? Did each one of those people, did God win, I guess? Was the evil spirit driven out? Or how did those end?
We didn't get into those kinds of specifics, but he said in each case, the person recovered. That was the word he used. Of course, he's a medical doctor before he was a priest, but he used the word recovered. Again, he said that their lives began to their lives didn't switch on a dime, but their lives did start getting better, and all of the manifestations, everything that they were experiencing beforehand, all of that went away. They just had to deal with the memory of all these things. And there are times, and I'll say this, I say I've never done one. I've never truly witnessed evil or the devil being manifested. But all of us have moments where we've gone into places or been around people where the hair on the back of our neck has stood up. I never want to call a person evil, because God made them so they're good, but that good person can be possessed by evil. But have visited on death row, and I say this, not every human being I have visited on death row has scared me, but there are two that I couldn't wait to get out of the visiting room. I mean, as we say, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. There was just, the eyes were empty. I mean, so there were, moments where I had experiences that scared me. Now, was I experiencing real evil, or I don't know, but I know it scared me. So, and again, I have visited a lot of men and women on death row. Well, not a lot of women, there aren't that many, but a lot of the men on death row, and they don't scare me. they did what they did. But there are two that stand out. I mean, like I said, nice talking to you, jailer.
Right. You are the priest of a very large church there on West End. Is this something people ask you about? Do you have people ask you about this issue? Is it something that's talked about much or not?
Fits and starts. Of course, Halloween's coming up, so I'm getting questions. Getting questions from our youth group.
Oh yeah.
And some of the kids. I'm getting ready. The Titans football season sort of interferes with a lot of stuff I do because they play out on Sunday morning. But just as soon as we get the season over with, I'll be launching a series of adult education classes, and the title of it is The Biography of the Devil. And I had given my parishioners a chance to say, if we had a class on this, or this, what do you want? It was almost unanimous. When I had a course titled The Biography of the Devil, which will be a cultural historical study of how evil has been described, how different cultures deal with the problems of evil, and even how we deal with it within Christianity differently, because huge difference between a more fundamentalist evangelical Christian background as opposed to mainline Protestants, which is much more sacramental. So there are different ways we talk about evil and deal with it, but we're talking about the same thing, just different words, different ways of describing things.
So people are asking, and they're fascinated by this.
Very much so, yeah.
And they want to know. They want to know, what's your experience, and the same questions you've had tonight.
Oh yes, it's a movie may come out, something may be said. It's a series of books might be written, and so we get questions. When we talk about, for example, Lord of the Rings. Now, the real evil there? No, but Tolkien was an unbelievably pious Catholic, and the rings are just loaded with theology, and he's trying to deal with how evil is presented in the world. And he managed to show that every time that evil has risen and tried to confront the world, Middle Earth, it's been defeated, but not without great cost. C.S. Lewis, he has a wonderful book called the Screwtape Letters, which is a whole bunch of letters, with the devil. The Line, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Now some people look at those and say, oh, we don't want our kids around those too much because they might take them down the wrong path, but not really, because ultimately they don't take you down the path of evil, they take you down the path of goodness.
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right, we'll take a break. Come back. Continue the discussion. Take a break. Be back right after this.